Sean Combs, known as Diddy, known as Puff Daddy, is about to stand trial in New York in May. Combs had his famous white parties.
So I moved to a new neighborhood and they were like, well, what's this guy doing moving here in East Hampton? I said, everybody, come on over to the house so y'all get to know me. You ain't got nothing to be afraid of.
Some of the alleged activity may have occurred in the later hours of those parties.
Kids have like an hour left because this thing turns into something that when y'all get older, y'all don't want to come to.
And there are a lot of questions. What he's exactly charged with, who's going to testify, what this case is going to look like. But before we get to those questions, we want to remind everybody how we got here.
Where we hanging out and what we doing, we can't really disclose, but it's definitely a 15-year-old's dream. He signed to Usher.
I'm signed to Usher.
I had legal guardianship of Usher when you know he did his first album. I did Usher's first album. I don't have legal guardianship of him, but for the next 48 hours, he's with me. So and we gonna go full crazy.
Going crazy.
Well, Bill and Sade, accepting a plea agreement would mean that Sean Combs would have to admit to trafficking and force. And today he made it very clear that was not going to happen. Diddy maintained all along these encounters involved consenting adults and plans to take his chances that a jury agrees.
At trial, Combs will ditch the jail garb and wear ordinary clothes. As his lawyers argue, the evidence shows consenting adults being intimate in their own way.
What happens is if people go into a trial believing the firepower on the prosecution is so strong, I mean, let's say on a scale of 1 to 100, it's a 95, that it's so strong, but it goes down to an 88. That helps the defense because everybody goes in thinking, wow, they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and all of a sudden, none of it's there. I think that actually helps the defense.
We have the latest from federal court in the Sean Combs criminal case. Status of jury selection, what Diddy's going to be wearing, violation of a gag order, rejecting a plea offer.
Federal trafficking, racketeering, and charges beginning Monday morning.
Back up a little bit, please.
How can you support your father? How do you support him moving forward?
Elaborate, sometimes days-long parties by coercing victims through drugs, threats, and manipulation. They claim to have video evidence, and some of the accusations echo details from over 70 civil lawsuits filed against Combs over the last 30 years.
Mr. Combs feels he probably is the only person I know of who might be able to actually accomplish that.
Now, as far as jury selection goes, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that both sides expect to have all of this done in the matter of 3 days. Now, given just how high profile this trial is, I was kind of stunned that they seem very confident that they will be able to seat a jury in that amount of time.
Do you still think that, because there is this public perception, that there are celebrity tapes involved in this case?
No.
Do you still think that there are minors involved in this case?
I'm certain no.
Okay.
And again, when you say this case, we're talking the criminal case.
The criminal case. In the criminal, I know that.
In the criminal case. In the criminal case, no.
What made you come here to support Puff?
I'm supporting Puff because he's innocent, and I'm wholeheartedly believing his innocence, and I know he's innocent. So
you think you know he's innocent?
1,000%.
She did, and when the judge did, Diddy, who was sitting at the defense table with his attorneys, did not show any signs of emotion. He took a sip of water before he was led out of the courtroom by the U.S. Marshals. Now, his lawyers have vowed to fight this. They are going to be back in court on Wednesday before the judge who will oversee this trial and try to get Diddy to be released.
Major developments tonight involving the case against Sean Diddy Combs, what he decided in court today, and what this now means, the move coming just 4 days before his trial is set to begin. Here's Aaron Katursky.
Tonight, Sean Combs makes it official. He's rejecting the government's offer to plead guilty and spare himself the possibility of a prolonged term in prison. When asked if he turned down the offer, Combs answered, "Yes, I do, Your Honor," as he stood in a baggy beige jail uniform. Terms were not disclosed, but prosecutors did say a plea could result in a shorter sentence for Combs than if he's convicted.
He knows The deck is stacked against him. They've got a ton of evidence. Take the plea deal, dude. Just take it.
Well, my guess is that, because we don't know the deal of the plea deal. At least I don't think we do.
True.
Okay.
Would you be open to a plea bargain?
Well, it's not up to me. It's up to Mr. Combs, and I don't see it happening.
Why?
Because he believes he's innocent. He believes he's innocent. And what's more, he believes that he needs to stand up, not just for himself, for his family, and for everybody who's been targeted by the federal government.
Diddy's lawyers had argued that he had made good faith efforts by showing up in New York, ready to surrender to face these charges, but prosecutors said that he could not be trusted, that he has a history of trying to intimidate witnesses, including some who are going to be witnesses in this case. They urged the judge to remand him. Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs back behind bars, a magistrate judge denying him bail, saying that there were no conditions that she could conceive of that would make her confident that he would appear again for other court appearances. The judge saying, my concern is this is a crime that happens behind closed doors.
The decision guarantees Combs will face trial beginning just 4 days from now that will test whether one of music's most prolific figures used his power, wealth, and fame to exploit both women and men for decades.
Isn't that, to my mind, that's one of the bigger hurdles in selecting a jury this coming week, is that there is, at least anecdotally, when I talk to people, they have that opinion, strongly held opinion, that there's celebrity tapes, that they've kind of conflated Epstein, and you mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell and all of these things into Diddy. There's this idea that somehow this is Epstein redux or something.
The last hearing before Sean Combs' trial starts, when he walked into federal court today, he appeared to be looking for his family. They've pretty much been at all of the hearings that I've been to, but there was no presence of his sons or his mother or his sister who had previously been at those hearings.
This is going to be such a massive trial, like maybe the biggest Hollywood trial. God knows which way it's going to go. Is it going to go on for weeks?
For sure, weeks.
Los Angeles. Federal prosecutors confirmed this morning that investigators have obtained a previously unknown video file supplied by counsel for recording artist Justin Bieber, and that the footage will be incorporated into the government's exhibit list in United States versus Sean Combs. According to an 8-page notice filed under seal and later released in redacted form, the file arrived last week through a secure cloud transfer link accompanied by a sworn declaration from Bieber's legal team. The declaration states that the clip was extracted from a handheld camera memory card kept in long-term storage, and that Bieber viewed and authenticated the content during a recent document review undertaken for civil litigation purposes. Prosecutors describe the file as relevant because the timestamp, embedded metadata, and visual markers place it at a private gathering long alleged but never previously documented on video to feature guest wing access controls central to the government's case. The footage runs 14 minutes and 32 seconds and depicts a guest area corridor at a residence owned by a Combs-affiliated holding company. Throughout the clip, multiple uniformed staff members escort small groups of individuals past a static camera position toward an interior door, identified on architectural plans as a restricted wing entrance. During several sequences, the camera pans, capturing radio communications audible via open speaker. A staff member uses the phrase "heartbeat reset" on 3 occasions, language that appears in shift roster spreadsheets earlier, admitted through testimony from former security chief Roger Bonds. Prosecutors contend that the repeated phrase aligns Bieber's footage with other evidence showing a pattern of scheduled door access cycles, camera interruptions, and linen replacement directives. Defense counsel counter that the phrase is innocuous, characterizing it as an internal term for routine guest service refreshment. The court will hold a pre-admission hearing to determine whether jurors may view the entire clip or only limited excerpts. Prosecutors assert that the most compelling element of the video is a voice heard issuing instructions over a handheld radio at 5 distinct points. A forensic audio analyst retained by the government conducted a voice comparison study matching the voice to a Combs executive assistant whose communications appear in previously introduced chat logs. Defense attorneys have requested an independent voice identification examination, arguing that ambient noise and signal compression may compromise accuracy. Judge Aaron Subramanian granted the request, but set an expedited deadline, explaining that the trial schedule cannot absorb prolonged dueling expert testimony. Should the defense expert produce a materially different conclusion, the court will decide whether to conduct a Dober hearing. In conjunction with the video, prosecutors filed a supplemental exhibit chart correlating the footage's timecoder increments with network router logs already in evidence. The chart shows synchronized device connections assigned to Bieber's initials at the same access point beacons visible in the frame. Investigators obtained the router logs under a prior warrant and confirmed through device registration tables that Bieber's phone remained active on the network until security staff collected guest devices shortly after arrival. Bieber's declaration explains that he used a separate handheld video camera unrelated to his mobile phone, thereby accounting for simultaneous wireless network logs and continuous video capture. Defense lawyers intend to question why Bieber retained the camera when other devices were surrendered, suggesting preferential treatment or a lapse in security protocol. Prosecutors respond that any security lapse underscores their argument that access procedures varied depending on guest profile, undermining defense claims of uniform operational standards. Bieber's footage additionally captures a brief exchange involving two staff members discussing linen inventory shortages. The video shows one worker stating that guest wing refresh bins require immediate replenishment. Prosecutors intend to pair this remark with procurement records showing same-day rush orders for industrial-grade cleaning supplies. Defense argued in pre-hearing filings that supply orders during extended holiday weekends are unremarkable, but prosecutors maintain the timing aligns with previously charted spikes recorded on nights when door sensor logs indicate guest wing resets. The government notice emphasizes that Bieber is not classified as a target, subject, or person of interest, and that his cooperation was voluntary. Bieber's declaration asserts that he had no prior knowledge of the footage's evidentiary value and located the file only after counsel requested a comprehensive review of archived media assets for unrelated civil litigation. The declaration further states that Bieber has not received, nor does he expect, any financial consideration for providing the material. Defense attorneys nevertheless signaled they will explore potential civil incentives during cross-examination if prosecutors call Bieber as a live witness. Prosecutors have not yet indicated whether they will seek Bieber's testimonial narrative or rely solely on the authentication declaration and expert corroboration. Legal analysts note that the appearance of new video evidence at this stage carries both probative potential and strategic risk. On one hand, the footage supplies visual documentation of staff movement, radio terminology, and guest wing access previously described only through spreadsheets, audio logs, and witness recollection. On the other hand, introducing new material mid-trial invites defense arguments regarding notice, preparation time, and possible jury prejudice. Judge Subramanian acknowledged those concerns in a minute order, but wrote that the federal rules of criminal procedure allow supplementation if the evidence could not have been obtained earlier with reasonable diligence. The court directed prosecutors to provide the defense a full forensic copy of the file, associated hash values, and examiners' chain of custody logs within 24 hours. Upon public disclosure of the supplemental filing, private event insurers circulated revised advisories to clients. One insurer notified policyholders that any future claims may require proof of continuous video coverage for all guest wing corridors, citing the Bieber clip as proof that handheld devices can preserve metadata even when formal security protocols demand device collection. Risk managers at 3 major labels began drafting updated pre-event checklists, stipulating that any device collection policy must be documented on signed guest consent forms, with clearly defined exceptions for credentialed media equipment. Law firms representing plaintiffs in parallel civil actions quickly filed motions to obtain the Bieber footage under existing protective orders. Defense counsel in those lawsuits opposed immediate release, asserting that civil discovery should not proceed until the criminal matter concludes to avoid witness tampering concerns. A magistrate judge scheduled a joint discovery conference and urged parties to coordinate with the criminal court's confidentiality requirements. Within hours of the filing, social media platforms buzzed with references to Bieber's involvement. Public relations advisors for Bieber issued a brief statement reiterating that he is cooperating in accordance with legal obligations and will not comment further. Entertainment industry commentators debated whether Bieber's file materially shifts the evidentiary balance or merely corroborates patterns already suggested by technical exhibits. Some observers stressed that juror comprehension often increases when data points are presented through visual media, rather than spreadsheets or log tables. Defense attorneys released a short press statement suggesting the video lacks context, stating that any large-scale private event will feature schedule adjustments, linen turnovers, and controlled access to maintain privacy. They also argued that a single clip depicting staff movement does not demonstrate unlawful conduct and warned against trial by social media headline. Prosecutors responded during an afternoon sidebar that they do not intend to present the footage as standalone proof of misconduct, but will integrate it within the broader mosaic of documentary and testimonial evidence already in the record. Experts retained by media outlets observed that the chain of custody certification appears airtight on its face. The FBI lab produced a report indicating that the file's SHA-256 hash has remained consistent through each copying stage and that EXIF metadata bears no indication of tampering software or re-encoding artifacts. Defense counsel hinted they may retain a private digital forensics firm to examine the same forensic image. In similar cases, courts have ruled that dueling experts may testify if their methodologies differ materially, but the judge reiterated that any redundant technical testimony must be limited to prevent undue delay. Logistically, the court adjusted the witness schedule, moving a supply chain analyst to the following week to allow the defense opportunity to review the new exhibit. The judge denied a defense motion for a continuance longer than 48 hours, reasoning that the underlying metadata had been available in discovery for months and that the new clip merely adds corroborative imagery. Advocacy organizations for performer safety seized on the latest development to advance calls for statutory protections. A coalition of musician rights groups renewed lobbying efforts for a state-level bill that would require baseline safety certification for private music industry events, including independent compliance officers with unrestricted recording authority. Industry associations representing venue owners voiced tentative support, so long as liability caps accompany any new mandates. The property where the footage was recorded, identified in earlier filings as a Los Angeles residence, has already transferred into nonprofit ownership following a court-approved forfeiture sale. Renovation plans are under review by municipal authorities, with organizers stating that the guest wing corridor captured in the Bieber footage will be preserved as a training exhibit demonstrating the importance of transparent egress routes. Financial markets reacted modestly to the filing. A beverage brand partner previously linked to Combs saw a 2% intraday decline before recovering in late trading. Analysts attributed the volatility to headline risk rather than material business changes, noting that corporate sponsors began phasing out promotional content featuring Combs months earlier. Legal experts comment that the timing of the new clip places additional weight on jury instruction deliberations concerning late-produced evidence. The judge asked both parties to submit revised instruction proposals, clarifying how jurors should treat supplemental exhibits received during trial. Prosecutors favor language directing jurors to evaluate all admitted evidence equally, regardless of chronology. The defense seeks an instruction reminding jurors that late disclosure can impair cross-examination. The court will rule at the upcoming charge conference. Whether Bieber will appear in person remains undecided. Prosecutors say his in-court testimony would authenticate the footage definitively and provide context regarding device collection policies. The defense argues that in-person testimony would open irrelevant lines of questioning about celebrity relationships and could bias jurors. Judge Subramanian stated that the court will rule on witness necessity after hearing the defense experts' preliminary findings on voice identification and metadata integrity. If admitted in full, the Bieber footage will be played during the government's rebuttal case, likely following expert testimony on digital recording reliability. Should the defense succeed in excluding portions deemed inflammatory or cumulative, the jury may see only the corridor sequences without accompanying radio chatter. Either way, analysts say the existence of contemporaneous, time-stamped video represents a significant evidentiary development, particularly because it appears to bridge the gap between technical logs and human observation. The next scheduling order directs counsel to complete voice identification briefing within 3 business days. A sealed hearing will follow, after which the court is expected to issue a public summary indicating whether the footage, in whole or in part, will reach the jury. Until then, both sides are refining narratives in anticipation of closing arguments that will frame the Bieber clip either as decisive corroboration or as a misinterpreted snapshot of ordinary celebrity event logistics. Court resumed with an evidentiary hearing devoted entirely to the newly disclosed Bieber clip. Defense counsel began by calling an independent audio specialist who challenged the government's voice identification study. The specialist argued that radio static and corridor acoustics reduce the clarity of consonant onsets, making a confident match to any speaker unlikely. Under questioning, the expert conceded that the sample contained 5 uninterrupted syllables that aligned with control phrases used in standard comparison trials. Prosecutors followed by introducing a second waveform overlay prepared by the FBI laboratory that highlighted identical pitch contours between the radio speaker and a recorded staff orientation video already in evidence. After reviewing both exhibits, Judge Subramanian ruled that jurors would hear the tape, accompanied by limiting instructions clarifying that voice attribution is ultimately their decision. Immediately after the ruling, jurors entered the courtroom for the first public screening of the corridor footage. Prosecutors played the entire 14-minute file without commentary, allowing jurors to observe staff escorts, door cycles, and the repeated radio cue "heartbeat reset." A timestamp counter remained visible in the lower corner, and the court's projector displayed a synchronized chart of router log entries in real time. Once the screening concluded, prosecutors replayed a 40-second segment at reduced speed, emphasizing the moment 2 employees discuss linen shortages and reference refresh bins. Defense objected that slowed playback exaggerates events. The judge overruled but instructed the jury to treat regular and slow-motion versions with equal scrutiny. Cross-examination of the government's digital forensics agent focused on chain of custody procedures. Defense counsel pressed the agent on each transfer point, asking whether any hash verification failed. The agent confirmed that hash values remained constant. Counsel then queried whether the agent could prove no additional segments existed on the memory card. The agent responded that a full forensic image showed only the presented clip and ordinary blank space, indicating no deletions post-creation. The next witness, a lighting contractor employed at the residence during the recording window, testified about the heartbeat effect cited in the video. The witness explained it was a phased red pulse illumination designed to guide guests toward a designated wing. He acknowledged that during pulse cycles, other house lights dimmed automatically. Prosecutors used this detail to argue that management could time corridor traffic precisely, coordinating with door sensor downtime. Defense elicited testimony that the lighting system was integrated into an off-the-shelf home automation suite and was marketed for high-end events, suggesting nothing covert about its function. Following technical testimony, prosecutors introduced 2 brief email threads dated within the same week as the Bieber footage. The first thread shows a Combs aide requesting expedited linen deliveries. ASAP. Need full refresh by dawn, the supplier confirmed rush logistics. The second email details an internal directive to disable certain network cameras for maintenance, listing the same time block visible in the clip. Defense argued these emails lack context, but the judge admitted them under the business records exception. Public reaction continued outside court. Streaming services briefly spiked the Bieber catalog on personalized playlists, then stabilized. An industry analyst's report predicted that risk premiums for private event insurance will rise by double-digit percentages over the next renewal cycle. Meanwhile, major booking agencies circulated new guidelines. Clients must receive full floor plans, device policy disclosures, and independent security contact numbers before accepting any private estate appearance. In a consequential procedural turn, defense attorneys announced they would call an executive from the home automation vendor to testify that camera downtime was necessary for firmware updates and had no link to guest wing access. Prosecutors planned to counter with service records indicating that the same cameras reported reported healthy status hours before the alleged maintenance. The court scheduled the vendor's testimony for later in the week, instructing the parties to avoid brand marketing language. As the evidentiary phase narrows, jury instruction drafts attracted heightened debate. Defense proposed a new instruction advising jurors that late-produced exhibits may carry reduced weight. Prosecutors objected, saying the federal rules permit supplementation when promptly disclosed. After argument, Judge Subramanian opted for a neutral compromise. The jury will be told they may consider the timeline of disclosure as one factor among many, without presuming favor or disfavor. Separately, a civil court judge handling parallel claims authorized limited discovery of the Bieber materials under a strict protective order. The ruling specifies that counsel may review but not copy the footage and must conduct all examinations in a secure evidence room. Defense teams in those matters warned they will seek sanctions if any portion leaks to media. Inside the criminal courtroom, prosecutors called a data analytics consultant who mapped correlations between the Bieber clip, rotor pings, and linen delivery invoices. The consultant presented a heat map overlay showing near-perfect alignment across 4 data sets: video timestamps, device movement logs, linen order timestamps, and staff badge scans. Defense challenged the visualization as potentially misleading, but the judge ruled it admissible, citing demonstrative value supported by underlying records. With technical groundwork complete, prosecutors rested their rebuttal case. The defense moved for judgment of acquittal, arguing the evidence remained circumstantial. The court denied, finding that the aggregated exhibits and witness testimony provide a record sufficient for jury consideration. Closing arguments are scheduled to begin after a brief recess to finalize instructions. Prosecutors will emphasize the convergence of independent data sources: video, router logs, supply invoices, lighting controls, paired with direct testimony from insiders such as Roger Bonds. The defense intends to portray each data point as an innocuous fragment misinterpreted through hindsight, accentuating their theme that high-profile hospitality inherently generates unusual schedules and logistics. Meanwhile, legislative interest continues to grow. A draft statute now titled the Creative Industry Guest Safety Act includes funding for anonymous hotlines, mandatory event audit certifications, and penalties for withholding access to personal communication devices. Hearings are set for the next legislative session. Regardless of the trial's outcome, the sudden emergence of authenticated footage from a widely recognized performer underscores the increasing role personal archives can play in corporate governance disputes. Experts anticipate broader contractual reforms, including clauses that safeguard the right of third-party documentation and ensure transparent record retention policies. These measures, once optional checklist items, are quickly becoming industry norms as stakeholders absorb the lessons of a trial reshaped by 14 minutes of corridor video and synchronized metadata.